Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1: The Curious Shop on Fleet Street. The morning that began with drizzle ended, rather peculiarly, in murder. Fleet Street lay beneath a thin grey fog, its puddles catching the wan light of passing carriages. A row of shops stood shoulder to shoulder, their windows dimmed by the wet. Among them, half hidden between a tobacconist and a small cafe, was Merriweather's Antiques, a narrow, leaning establishment with an air of quiet neglect, as though time itself had forgotten it. It was there that Hercule Poirot, the celebrated Belgian detective, paused with his friend Captain Hastings beneath a striped awning that flapped in the wind. Poirot regarded the hand-painted sign above the door, its once elegant gold lettering faded to a dull yellow, and tilted his head approvingly. "Observe, mon ami," he said, smoothing his waxed moustache. "Even in decay, there is balance. The symmetry of those letters, the proportion of the window to the door, it pleases the eye." Hastings chuckled. "You find beauty in the strangest places, Poirot. Personally, I see nothing but a jumble of old junk." "Mais non," Poirot protested, his small hand fluttering in the air. "To dismiss the old as junk is the first folly of youth. Every object has its order, its history, and perhaps, its secret." With that, he pushed open the creaking door, and a small bell tinkled overhead. Inside, the shop was dim and close, smelling faintly of beeswax, paper, and something older, the dry scent of forgotten years. The counter to the left was cluttered with ledgers and price tags, while shelves rose to the ceiling, stacked precariously with china dogs, porcelain figurines, candlesticks, and tarnished silver trays. Behind the counter, a stout man of about 60 looked up from polishing a teapot. His face was round and pink, with kindly eyes and the expression of one long resigned to dust and disorder. "Good morning, gentlemen," he said cheerily. "Looking for anything in particular?" "Only curiosity, monsieur," said Poirot, smiling. "That, and perhaps a small clock of elegant design." "Ah, then you've come to the right place," the man said, setting down his cloth. "Merriweather's the name. Been in the trade these 40 years. You won't find better bargains in Fleet Street." As Merriweather spoke, Hastings began wandering the aisles, lifting objects, peering into cabinets, and occasionally muttering about the price of brass compasses. Poirot, meanwhile, examined the room with a keen but outwardly casual gaze. To the untrained eye, the shop seemed merely chaotic. To Poirot, every misplaced trinket and uneven pile told a story. The dust on the high shelves spoke of long neglect, the cleaner surfaces, of frequent handling. Near the counter, an area of floorboards had been recently polished, and there, just beside a small chest, lay something quite out of keeping with the scene, a woman's glove, cream-colored, soft leather, and faintly spattered with something dark. Poirot bent and picked it up delicately by the fingertips. "A lady has been careless, Monsieur Merriweather." The shopkeeper frowned. "A glove, you say? That's odd. None of my customers this morning were missing one, so far as I noticed." Hastings turned at once. "You've had visitors today, then?" "3, sir. Miss Clara, my niece, she helps me in the mornings. Then Mrs. Harcourt, one of my regulars. And a Mr. Blaine, a rival dealer from over in Holborn. Nasty fellow. Came to quarrel about the price of a carriage clock I sold last week." Poirot smiled faintly, turning the glove over in his hand. "How fortunate, Hastings. We stumble into society, commerce, and perhaps even passion, all within 10 minutes of stepping indoors." Before Hastings could reply, a sudden cry rang out from the back of the shop, high, sharp, and dreadful. A crash followed, the sound of glass shattering. "Good heavens!" cried Hastings. "What was that?" Mr. Merriweather's face turned white. From the storeroom. Clara was sorting the new stock. He hurried toward a narrow door behind the counter. Poirot was close behind him, moving with surprising swiftness. Hastings followed, his heart pounding. The storeroom was small, dimly lit by a single bulb. Crates and furniture crowded the floor. And there, beside a heavy mahogany chest, lay Mr. Merriweather, on his back, eyes staring upward, a silver letter opener buried in his side. Miss Clara Merriweather knelt beside him, her hands trembling, her pale face frozen in horror. "Uncle! Oh, Uncle," she sobbed. He's not breathing." Poirot knelt swiftly beside the body, feeling the pulse at the neck, then examining the wound with clinical precision. His expression was grave but calm. "He is beyond our help," he said quietly. "Death has been instantaneous. Observe, Hastings, the angle of the blade, clean and deliberate." Hastings swallowed. "Murder, then?" Poirot's eyes flickered to the young woman. "Tell me, mademoiselle, did you see anyone leave the room?" She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No one. I was fetching labels from the cupboard, and when I turned, he was already, oh." Poirot rose slowly, his gaze sweeping the small room. "You have locked the front door, Hastings." "Of course," said Hastings. "Good. Then we may regard the matter as contained." He crouched once more beside the chest, noting the slight displacement of dust, the faint scuff marks on the floorboards, and a few coins scattered nearby. To one side lay a porcelain brooch in the shape of a butterfly, its wing broken clean in half. Poirot picked it up and examined it closely. "Curious," he murmured. "The work is fine, delicate, a lady's ornament. Yet it lies beside a dead man's hand. A juxtaposition most telling." At that moment, a brisk voice came from the doorway. "Good heavens, what's going on here?" Inspector Japp stood there, coat collar up against the rain, expression hard. "Poirot! I might have known you'd be in the thick of it." Poirot inclined his head politely. "Always a pleasure, Inspector. You arrive most punctually, the body is still warm." Japp grunted, glancing at the corpse. "Merriweather, eh?" "Old dealer, known to me." "Any sign of robbery?" "Superficially, perhaps," said Poirot. "But robbery, my friend, is rarely so polite. Look about you, the drawers pulled, yes, but not emptied. Coin spilled, yet notes untouched. It is too neat to be theft. Non, this is something altogether more personal." Japp frowned. "And who found him?" "His niece, Miss Clara Merriweather." Poirot turned to the trembling girl. "You will forgive me, mademoiselle, but one must always begin with those nearest the scene. You were in this room when it happened?" She nodded miserably. "Only for a moment." "I swear it." Poirot looked at her for a long time, then nodded gently. "We shall see. For now, Inspector, permit me one small request, do not move anything. The truth, I think, lies not in what was taken, but in what was left behind." As he spoke, the bell at the shop door tinkled faintly once more. Poirot turned, eyes narrowing. "Ah," he murmured, "perhaps another visitor. The stage, Hastings, is set. And the first act, it seems, has concluded with tragedy." Chapter 2, The Scene of the Crime. Inspector Japp was never a man to waste time once a corpse had been found. Within the hour, the little antique shop had become a place of quiet chaos. A constable stood at the door, keeping back curious onlookers who had gathered in the drizzle. Another took notes while Japp moved briskly from counter to cabinet, muttering beneath his breath, Poirot, however, remained perfectly still in the center of the shop, as though he were a small and immaculately dressed statue placed there for decoration. His grey-green eyes roved gently about the room, lingering on each detail. A chair moved slightly askew, a framed painting crooked on its hook, a small puddle of wax beneath a candle that had burned almost to its end. "The shop is untidy," Japp grumbled, "but there's no sign of forced entry. Looks like a robbery gone wrong. The old man might have interrupted the thief." Poirot raised one finger delicately. Non, mon cher Japp. There is disturbance, yes, but it is not the disturbance of panic. You see? Only certain drawers opened, the coin spilled but not gathered, the papers untouched. This is a stage set for the appearance of theft, not theft itself. Japp snorted. You mean it's been arranged? Poirot's lips curved. Precisely. From the doorway came Hastings, who had been outside speaking with a constable. His expression was troubled. There's no sign of anyone leaving after the murder, Poirot. The neighbors didn't see a soul. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. That, Hastings, agrees perfectly with what the dust tells me. Look down, there are 2 sets of footprints near the counter. One small and narrow, one larger and heavier. Yet, observe, only one set leads to the door. Hastings bent to look. By Jove, you're right. Then the other person is still inside. Not now, perhaps. But when the deed was done, the murderer did not depart by the front. Poirot gestured toward a side door half hidden behind a tall bookcase. There is another exit, no doubt leading to the rear alley. It would be most prudent to check whether it was unlocked. A constable went to see and returned moments later. Doors bolted on the inside, sir. Doesn't look like it's been used this morning. Japp frowned. Then where the devil did the murderer go? Poirot gave a small shrug. Ah, that, my friend, is what we shall discover, by order and by method. He knelt once more beside the late Mr. Merriweather. The position of the body was oddly composed, one arm resting by his side, the other reaching faintly toward the fallen butterfly brooch. There was no sign of struggle, only the calm stillness of sudden death. Poirot studied the wound again. A letter opener, sharp and slender, driven in with precision. The killer was not clumsy. He sniffed lightly at the air, his nose twitching. And do you notice, Hastings, a certain fragrance? Hastings inhaled cautiously. Perfume, isn't it? Sweet, rather like jasmine, I'd say. Exactly so. Not the sort of scent one associates with gentlemen. At that, Japp straightened. So we're looking for a woman. Perhaps. Or perhaps, Poirot replied, a man who has been close to one. Japp groaned softly. I might have known you'd complicate it. It was nearly noon when the suspects were gathered. The rain had stopped, but the air remained heavy and grey. Poirot and Hastings stood by the counter while Japp conducted the formal questioning. Miss Clara Merriweather, the deceased's niece, sat pale and trembling, twisting a lace handkerchief in her hands. Her fair hair had come loose, and her eyes were red from weeping. I had no quarrel with my uncle, she said in a faint voice. He could be stern, yes, but he was kind to me. I came to the shop at 9, as usual. There was a delivery of stock for sorting. Uncle was in good spirits, he even joked that he'd make a sale before luncheon. Then Mrs. Harcourt came in, and a little later, Mr. Blaine. Did they argue? Japp asked. She hesitated. Mr. Blaine did raise his voice. Something about a clock, he said Uncle had cheated him. But Uncle laughed and told him to leave. Mrs. Harcourt left shortly after that. And when did you last see your uncle alive? I went into the storeroom to fetch some labels. When I returned, her voice broke, he was on the floor. Poirot leaned forward gently. Mademoiselle, this Mrs. Harcourt, what sort of lady is she? Very elegant, Clara whispered. She wears fine clothes and always smells of jasmine. Uncle said she had excellent taste in antiques. Merci. Poirot nodded gravely and turned to the next witness. Mr. Geoffrey Blaine was a heavyset man with a coarse complexion and eyes that shifted restlessly. His tone was surly. You'll get nothing out of me, he said. I didn't kill him. Yes, I had words with Merriweather. He sold that French clock under my nose. But I left, I tell you. He was alive when I walked out. What time was that? Jap demanded. 10:15, thereabouts. I went straight to my shop in Holborn. Ask my assistant. Poirot regarded him mildly. You are a man of business, Monsieur Blaine. You value profit, yes. Course I do. What of it? Then surely you would not kill your rival. The dead do not pay their debts. Blaine scowled. You talk in riddles, monsieur. Not riddles, Poirot said softly, merely logic. Finally came Mrs. Violet Harcourt, a woman of about 50, graceful, composed, dressed in a dove-grey coat and a small hat trimmed with feathers. Her gloved hands were folded neatly in her lap. I am still quite shaken, she said, her voice trembling. Mr. Merriweather was always so obliging. I had come to look at a set of miniature spoons, a Georgian, I believe, but I had scarcely begun when that dreadful man Blaine arrived. Such a vulgar creature. I could not bear the noise, so I withdrew to the front of the shop. You saw nothing, then? Nothing, Inspector. Only heard the shouting. Then Miss Merriweather screamed, and, well, you know the rest. Poirot inclined his head politely. You are fond of antiques, madam? Indeed, yes. I find beauty in the old and forgotten. Comme c'est curieux, murmured Poirot, for that is precisely what Mr. Merriweather himself might have said. Mrs. Harcourt looked puzzled, then smiled faintly. Perhaps that is why we got along so well. Poirot's eyes flicked, ever so briefly, to the brooch pinned to her sleeve, a delicate porcelain butterfly, its left wing intact, its right chipped. He said nothing. When the questioning ended, Jap stretched wearily. We'll have to check their alibis, of course. Could take days. Days? Poirot repeated, raising an eyebrow. Ah, my poor Jap, your patience is admirable. But you see, I have already begun to eliminate. Already? You've barely started. Poirot smiled. One must observe, not only what is said, but how it is said, the eyes that flicker, the voice that trembles, the small details that escape the conscious mind. That, my friend, is where truth hides. He straightened his tie, glanced once more about the shop, and murmured. There is something wrong here, not merely a death, but an arrangement, a pattern too deliberate. I shall find the center of this design, and then, poof, the mystery, she will unravel herself. Hastings sighed. And what do we do meanwhile? Poirot's eyes twinkled. We wait, mon ami. We wait for the dust to settle, and for the guilty conscience to stir. Outside, the rain began again, soft and steady, tapping against the window panes of Merriweather's antiques as though marking time for the little grey cells already at work. Chapter 3. The Suspects. The following morning dawned dull and grey, with a fine mist hanging over the Thames. London, draped in its habitual melancholy, seemed to Poirot an entirely fitting backdrop for deceit. He and Hastings were seated in the small parlour of the modest lodging house where Poirot was staying. A neat breakfast tray lay before them, toast, coffee, and boiled eggs. Poirot, however, ate little. His mind was elsewhere, tracing, as he put it, the pattern of human folly. My dear Hastings, he said, carefully aligning his knife and fork at right angles, you English, you have a saying, still waters run deep. But I find it to be quite the opposite. It is the turbulent waters that hide the greatest depths. When the surface is calm, then one must look for the current below. Hastings, who had been buttering his toast rather vigorously, looked puzzled. You mean one of them is pretending to be calm, but isn't? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Très bien, mon ami. Precisely that. There came a knock at the door. Inspector Japp entered without ceremony, his coat still glistening with rain. Morning, Poirot. I've got some of the background you wanted. He produced a small folder from his pocket and placed it on the table. Merriweather, real name Harold Merriweather, 61, widower, long-time dealer. Bit of a reputation for sharp bargains, but nothing illegal. His niece, Clara, came to live with him 3 years ago after her parents died. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. And the parents, they were respectable people. Respectable enough, Japp replied. Her father was a clerk in a solicitor's office, mother passed 10 years back. Not much money left, by all accounts. And Mrs. Harcourt, asked Poirot. A widow of some standing, said Japp. Married into money. Her husband, Arthur Harcourt, died abroad some years ago, South Africa, I think. Left her comfortable. She's known in society circles, though not quite the best circles, if you take my meaning. Bit of a taste for gossip, expensive hats, and younger company. And Mr. Blaine? Hastings asked. Japp grinned grimly. Rough sort. Owns a small shop in Holborn. Known for temper and drink, but no record. Always quarrelling with other dealers, said Merriweather undercut him on a few rare pieces. Poirot leaned back, fingertips together. So, each has motive, each has opportunity, and each lies, at least a little. But which lie is fatal? That is what we must decide. That afternoon, Poirot returned to Merriweather's Antiques with Hastings. The shop was quieter now, sealed off by police tape, though Japp had permitted Poirot to examine the premises again. Poirot moved slowly through the narrow aisles, every motion deliberate. He touched nothing, but his sharp gaze took in everything, the uneven layer of dust, the scuff marks on the wooden floor, the faint indentation on the counter where a hand had rested repeatedly. Hastings, he said softly, note the dust upon the cabinet nearest the door, it is disturbed in a single patch. Someone leaned here, perhaps to listen, perhaps to conceal something. But see, it is high, too high for Miss Merriweather, who is petite. You think it was Blaine? Or Mrs. Harcourt? She is tall. Poirot paused, then added, you see, mon ami, murder is an art, and art always leaves traces of its creator. As he spoke, Miss Clara Merriweather entered quietly, her face pale beneath a mourning veil. Inspector Japp said I might collect some personal things, she said softly. I promised not to disturb anything. Of course, mademoiselle, Poirot said kindly. It is very brave of you to return. Most young ladies would find this place unbearable. She gave a wan smile. It feels different now, colder, somehow. Uncle loved his shop, even when business was poor. He used to say, every object here has a story, Clara. You only have to listen. Poirot nodded gently. A wise man, your uncle. Tell me, mademoiselle, did he mention lately any object of particular value? Something that might attract attention. Her eyes widened slightly. He did speak of one item, she said hesitantly. A silver locket he'd recently acquired. He said it might fetch a handsome price at auction, but that he wished to sell it quietly. I don't know why. Aha! Poirot's eyes gleamed. A locket, you say? Describe it. It was oval, engraved with initials, AM, I think. And inside it was a tiny portrait of a young woman. Poirot exchanged a brief glance with Hastings. "And now, mademoiselle, where is it?" "I don't know," she whispered. "It's not in the ledger, and I can't find it anywhere. I assumed Uncle had sold it already." "Or that someone else sold it for him," Poirot murmured. Miss Merriweather looked at him fearfully. "Do you mean Mrs. Harcourt?" "Ah, we do not accuse," Poirot said smoothly. "We only observe." Later that day, Poirot and Hastings called upon Mrs. Violet Harcourt at her elegant townhouse in Kensington. A maid showed them into a tastefully furnished drawing room, all pale silk and polished wood. Mrs. Harcourt herself was seated at the window, a shawl about her shoulders, a cup of tea poised delicately in her hand. "Messrs," she greeted them faintly. "This dreadful business has left me quite distraught. Poor Mr. Merriweather, such a gentle man." Poirot bowed. "You are gracious to receive us, madam." "I will be brief. You were, I think, acquainted with him for some time." "Several years. He often found lovely trinkets for me, a silver vinaigrette, an ivory fan. He had exquisite taste." "And you were fond of him?" Her eyes flickered briefly. "As a friend, certainly. But really, Monsieur Poirot, do you imagine I am capable of stabbing a man? It is grotesque." Poirot inclined his head. "Grotesque, perhaps. Yet one must never underestimate the heart when it fears exposure." "Exposure?" Her tone sharpened. "What do you mean by that?" "Only that the truth, madam, has a habit of revealing itself at the most inconvenient moments." For the first time, Mrs. Harcourt seemed unsettled. Her gloved hand trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. Poirot's gaze, ever meticulous, caught a flash of porcelain at her wrist, a butterfly brooch with a faint crack along one wing. He smiled gently. "Ah, such a charming ornament. A twin, perhaps, to one that lies broken in the shop." Mrs. Harcourt's expression froze. I don't know what you mean." "This brooch was a gift from a friend." "Indeed?" Poirot said softly. "And yet, I find it curious that two such identical butterflies should flutter so close to tragedy." He rose, bowing politely. "I thank you for your time, madam. The truth, she comes to all of us, sooner or later." As they left the house, Hastings turned to him, puzzled. "Poirot, are you suggesting she dropped the other brooch in the struggle?" "My dear Hastings," said Poirot, "I suggest nothing. I merely see, and I remember. One brooch broken, one intact. One glove left behind. One scent of jasmine. There is a symmetry forming, and I, who adore symmetry, find it irresistible." "But what of Blaine?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Blaine is noise without music, anger without direction. A dangerous man, yes, but not a subtle one. Non, Hastings, our murderer is precise, graceful, and proud. One who kills not for greed, but for preservation." "Preservation?" "OUI," said Poirot softly. "To preserve a secret. The question, mon ami, is whose?" They walked on in silence, their footsteps echoing faintly in the damp streets, as the fog thickened once more around London, a fitting veil for secrets yet to be uncovered. Chapter 4: Shadows and Clues. It was late afternoon when Hercule Poirot returned once more to Merriweather's Antiques. The shop had been reopened briefly under police supervision, to allow for inventory checks and formal documentation. Yet to Poirot, it seemed far less a place of commerce than a theatre awaiting its second act. The air inside was still heavy with dust and disuse, the curtains drawn against the grey daylight. Poirot stood near the counter, his small gloved hands clasped neatly behind his back, his eye sweeping the space as though seeing it anew. Captain Hastings followed, dutiful but somewhat restless, glancing from object to object as though half expecting one to leap forward and confess. "My dear Hastings," said Poirot quietly, "it is remarkable, is it not, how murder transforms a place? Before, this shop was merely cluttered, a harmless chaos. Now, everything speaks. Every item waits to be questioned." "I can't see that anything speaks, exactly," Hastings replied. "All looks much the same to me as yesterday." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, but that is the English way, to overlook what is under the nose. You see, the scene of crime is like a clock that has stopped. If you study the hands, you may know the precise moment when time ceased to tick." He crouched beside the counter and ran his finger lightly along the edge. A small smudge of dark wax caught his eye. He lifted it delicately on the tip of a penknife. "Wax," he murmured. "Scented, and of a kind used to seal letters. But the color, deep burgundy, almost purple. A lady's choice." "Mrs. Harcourt's, perhaps," suggested Hastings. "Perhaps. But we do not jump to conclusions, hein? We walk, step by step. The wax, the glove, the brooch, these are fragments, yes, but of the same picture." He then gestured for Hastings to bring him the waste bin from beneath the counter. Hastings complied, though not without a grimace. Within lay only crumpled papers and a scattering of dust. Poirot began to smooth each scrap carefully, his precision bordering on reverence. At last he paused, producing 3 torn pieces of heavier paper, the edges charred faintly as though once burned. With painstaking patience, he fitted them together. The message, though incomplete, revealed just enough to set the imagination alight. "Cannot let her learn the truth, meet me before the sale, destruction if revealed." Hastings gave a low whistle. "Good heavens, Poirot! That sounds like blackmail." "Ah," said Poirot softly, "you leap ahead again. It could be many things, a warning, a confession, perhaps even an ultimatum. But yes, the word truth, it has a dangerous sound in this affair. Someone feared its discovery." He tucked the fragment neatly into his notebook. "Now, Hastings, we must discover who wrote this letter, and to whom." As the light outside dimmed to a watery dusk, Inspector Japp arrived, his boots damp and his mood brisk. "Evening, Poirot. I've just been to Holborn. Blaine's alibi holds, his assistant swears he was in the shop all morning after 10:15. Not much of a case against him now." Poirot nodded mildly. "I thought as much. Blaine is a man who acts with his fists, not with letters sealed in wax." Japp frowned. "And the lady, Mrs. Harcourt?" "Ah, she is most interesting," said Poirot, with that infuriating air of calm certainty. "She is proud, clever, and accustomed to hiding what displeases her. I think she knows far more than she allows." Japp raised an eyebrow. "You've got proof of that?" Poirot pointed toward the counter. "Not yet. But I have found evidence of correspondence destroyed. And the scent of jasmine lingers here still, faint but persistent. Tell me, mon ami, do you know many who come to buy antiques wearing perfume so distinctive?" Japp's expression darkened. "No. But even if she was there, it doesn't mean she killed him." Poirot nodded gravely. "Quite so. But it means she lied." He turned then toward the shelves along the far wall, where a row of ledgers sat neatly aligned. Each bore a year inscribed in neat script, 1928, 1929, and so on. Poirot removed the latest, opened it carefully, and began to turn the pages. Hastings leaned over his shoulder. "There's nothing out of the ordinary," Hastings said, scanning the columns. "Sales, prices, buyers' names." Poirot's eyes, however, had stilled. Ah, he breathed, pointing to the final page. There, an entry in different ink, written in haste perhaps, item 47, to be sold discreetly. He looked up at Jap. Would you care to guess, Inspector, what this mysterious item 47 might be? Jap shrugged. Something valuable, I suppose. Jewels? Silver? Poirot smiled. More valuable than either, I think. It is a secret, one kept within a small silver locket. Hastings stared. You think this item 47 is the locket Miss Merriweather mentioned? Just so. It is, I believe, the very center of our little puzzle, the reason for the quarrel, the cause of death, and the key to the truth. Jap grunted. All that in a bit of jewelry. Poirot's eyes glimmered. It is not the locket itself, but what it contains, that matters. The following morning, Poirot invited Miss Clara Merriweather back to the shop. She arrived looking frail and pale, dressed in morning black. Her hands trembled as she removed her gloves. Mademoiselle, said Poirot gently, I wish to speak with you of your uncle's business affairs. Did you ever handle his correspondence? Sometimes, she said. He wasn't fond of writing letters himself, but he did receive quite a few, especially from Mrs. Harcourt. Ah. From Mrs. Harcourt, yes. Were they of a business nature? Clara hesitated. I'm not sure. He never discussed them, but once I saw her handwriting on an envelope he put away in the safe. He looked troubled. Troubled, repeated Poirot softly. And did you ever notice him sealing a letter? Yes, with dark red wax. He used a small brass seal shaped like an owl. Poirot's eyes brightened. Bon. Then we begin to see the outline. The wax I found matches your description perfectly. She looked bewildered. Do you mean my uncle was blackmailing Mrs. Harcourt? Poirot held up a finger. Not blackmail, mademoiselle, not necessarily. Let us call it le chantage moral, the moral pressure. Perhaps he knew something that placed her in an awkward position, and he sought to arrange matters quietly. He paused, studying her face. Did your uncle ever mention a man named Arthur Harcourt? She blinked. Only once, I think. He said the name with distaste. I thought it some rival dealer. Ah, murmured Poirot, how strange that he should speak of him to you, and yet his widow should deny all knowledge of a locket bearing the initials D.M. He gave a small sigh. You see, Hastings, we approach the truth by degrees. Every lie is a step upon the staircase of discovery. Clara looked fearful. You think Mrs. Harcourt? Poirot raised a hand. Patience, mademoiselle. The time for accusations will come soon enough. That evening, as the fog thickened once again along Fleet Street, Poirot sat by the shop window, deep in thought. Hastings watched him in silence. The detective's eyes were half closed, his lips pursed, his hands folded neatly upon his knee. At last, Poirot spoke. There is a letter burned, a locket missing, a scent of jasmine, and a butterfly broken in two. The murderer believes she has hidden her secret well, but already, Hastings, I begin to see the shape of it, like a face glimpsed through mist. He looked out into the gathering darkness. Tomorrow, mon ami, we shall draw aside the curtain, and the truth, she will stand revealed. Chapter 5, The Secret in the Ledger. The next morning broke with a pale light struggling through the London fog. The lamps still burned faintly along Fleet Street, their halos blurring in the damp air. Poirot, immaculately dressed as ever, arrived at Merriweather's Antiques with the calm air of a man who already knew the shape of the truth, yet preferred to let it reveal itself at its own pace. Inspector Japp awaited him inside, hands thrust deep into his coat pockets, his mood characteristically brisk. Morning, Poirot. I've had my men looking into Mrs. Harcourt's affairs as you asked. Seems she's been quietly selling off bits of jewellery these past few months, and not all the proceeds are easy to trace. Poirot raised his eyebrows. Ah. A lady of taste, yes, but also, perhaps, of necessity. That is interesting, n'est-ce pas? It suggests that beneath her elegance lies one petite difficult financier. Could be, Jap said. Though she's still living comfortably enough. I also spoke to her solicitor. She's kept her late husband's will sealed all these years. Claimed it was too painful to revisit. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A sealed will. A hidden past. And a locket marked with another woman's initials. Voila, the tapestry begins to weave itself. Jap chuckled. You've got a poetic way of putting it. All I see's a woman hiding something and an old man who found out. Precisely, my friend, said Poirot gravely. And when secrets are threatened, the heart grows desperate, even in the most refined bosoms. Poirot spent the better part of the morning at the shop, examining every cabinet and drawer with almost reverential patience. Hastings, ever the loyal assistant, trailed behind, occasionally sighing when the detective paused for several minutes to study a smudge or the tilt of a drawer handle. At last Poirot stopped before a small writing desk near the rear wall, one Hastings had scarcely noticed before. It was unremarkable, oak, with a single drawer and a faint scent of old Polish. Yet Poirot's fingers lingered on the brass keyhole. You see, Hastings, he said softly, the mind that commits murder is rarely content to destroy, it also seeks to conceal. The two instincts go hand in hand. I think our murderer hid something, perhaps quite literally. He crouched, examining the lower edge of the desk. With the tip of his penknife, he pried gently beneath the wood. A faint click sounded, and a small concealed compartment slid open with exquisite precision. Hastings gave a cry of surprise. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, lay a silver locket, dull with age, yet undeniably beautiful. Poirot lifted it gently, turning it so that the light caught the fine engraving on its surface, AM. The missing locket! Hastings exclaimed. You were right. Poirot nodded, eyes gleaming. Of course. Item 47. The very thing Monsieur Merriweather wished to sell discreetly. He opened it with delicate care. Inside was a miniature portrait of a young woman, serene, with soft eyes and dark hair coiled neatly beneath a ribbon. But it was the hidden compartment, almost invisible beneath the portrait, that made Poirot's lips tighten with satisfaction. Using the point of a penknife, he lifted the tiny clasp and revealed a folded slip of paper, yellowed with time. He unfolded it and read in silence. Then he handed it to Hastings, whose eyes widened as he scanned the text. It's a marriage certificate, he said. Between Arthur Harcourt and, good heavens, Marion Merriweather. Poirot closed the locket gently. The mother of Miss Clara Merriweather, he said softly. And the secret that bound all three together, husband, wife, and widow. Hastings was still struggling to grasp the full meaning. Then Mrs. Harcourt's late husband was already married, to Clara's mother? But that makes her. OUI, said Poirot quietly. A bigamist. And a criminal, though dead these many years. Imagine the shame, the scandal, the ruin that would follow if such a truth became public. Hastings whistled softly. So Merriweather must have discovered the locket and realized what it proved. Exactly, said Poirot. Perhaps he thought to use it to protect his niece's name or to secure her inheritance. Either way, he confronted Mrs. Harcourt. He may have offered her a chance to settle quietly, hence his note about selling discreetly. But the lady, proud and frightened, saw only exposure. And so she silenced him. He replaced the locket gently within its paper. Yet observe, Hastings, I do not accuse. I merely reason. Until I have tested every link, I accuse no one. That afternoon, Poirot sent a polite note requesting Mrs. Harcourt's presence at the shop. She arrived shortly before 4 o'clock, elegant as ever in a dark violet gown and gloves of fine kid leather. The fog pressed close against the windows, blurring the light. The room seemed hushed, almost sacred. "My dear madam," Poirot said with a bow, "you are most kind to come. I wished only to show you something that may interest you." He placed the wrapped locket upon the counter. "Do you recognize it?" Mrs. Harcourt's gloved hands trembled. No, I cannot say that I do." Poirot's tone remained gentle. "Come now, madam. Honesty is always graceful. This locket was found hidden in Mr. Merriweather's desk. Inside is a portrait of a lady, and behind it a marriage certificate." He paused delicately. A certificate uniting Arthur Harcourt and Marian Merriweather. For a moment, the woman said nothing. The ticking of the shop clock filled the silence. Then her composure broke. She swayed slightly, clutching at the counter. "Oh, dear God," she whispered. "He found it." Poirot inclined his head. "Yes, madam. He found it, and he knew what it meant. That your late husband had deceived you, and that his deception, if revealed, would destroy not only your reputation, but Miss Merriweather's peace as well." Tears glistened in her eyes, though her voice was still proud. "He promised me he would keep silent, he promised me." "Perhaps he did," Poirot said softly. "But fear is a cruel companion. When he spoke of selling the locket, you misunderstood. You believed he meant to betray you." She covered her face. "I went to him that morning, yes, I admit it. I begged him to give it back, to burn it. He refused. He said the truth must be faced, that Clara had a right to know. We struggled, I hardly remember, I saw the knife, and her voice broke. I only wanted to stop him speaking." Poirot's voice was almost tender. "And in that moment, madam, you stopped his heart instead." For a long time, there was silence. Mrs. Harcourt stood motionless, her gloved hands clasped tightly before her. When she finally spoke, it was with a kind of weary dignity. "You will do what you must, Monsieur Poirot. I ask only that you spare the girl. She is innocent of all this." Poirot bowed his head. "The innocent, madam, are always my first concern." When she had gone, Hastings turned to Poirot, deeply moved. "Then that's it, she's confessed. Why not have Japp arrest her at once?" Poirot shook his head gently. "No, Hastings. Not yet. There remains one final act. The truth must not only be found, it must be understood. And I think Miss Merriweather, too, deserves to know what was done, and why." He replaced the locket in its wrapping and slipped it into his pocket. "Tomorrow evening, I shall gather them all here, Japp, Miss Merriweather, Mrs. Harcourt, even our friend Blaine, to complete the circle. Then, mon ami, we shall reveal the full design." Hastings nodded, still shaken. "It's tragic, Poirot. Terribly tragic." "Indeed," said Poirot softly. "But murder, Hastings, is rarely born of evil alone. More often, it is born of fear, and fear, mon cher, is the most human of all emotions." Outside, the fog thickened once more, and the faint chime of a distant church bell marked the slow, solemn hour, as if London itself were tolling for the soul of Violet Harcourt. Chapter 6: The Gathering at the Shop. Evening descended upon Fleet Street with the quiet menace of a closing curtain. Fog rolled low across the cobbles, muffling sound and softening shape, until even the gas lamps seemed like ghosts adrift in the mist. Within Merriweather's Antiques, a single lamp burned upon the counter, its glow forming a golden island amid the gloom. Hercule Poirot stood beside it, small and immaculate, surveying the space as one might survey a stage before a play begins. Everything was arranged just as he desired, for chairs near the counter, the shop tidied to its original order, the curtains drawn, the air faintly scented by polish and dust. Captain Hastings, standing near the doorway, shifted restlessly. "I say, Poirot, must we really do this here? It feels rather morbid, gathering them all where it happened." Poirot smiled faintly. "My's OUI, Hastings. The scene of the crime is where truth dwells. If one wishes to awaken memory, or conscience, one must return to the place of birth. Besides, I have always found that murderers, like actors, cannot resist the final performance." Hastings sighed. "If you ask me, it's more like a trap than a performance." "Perhaps," said Poirot softly. "But one set with kindness, not cruelty. Tonight, my friend, we bring light where there has been shadow." At 7:30, Inspector Japp arrived first, stamping his boots against the damp. "Evening, Poirot. All ready for your grand unveiling, eh? I hope this isn't another one of your fancy dramas." Poirot inclined his head. "No drama, my dear Japp, only revelation. We shall not accuse, we shall explain. When people understand, they often condemn themselves more effectively than the law." Japp grunted. "Well, you've got the confession already. What more do you need?" Poirot gave him a look both knowing and kind. "Ah, Japp, the confession of words is nothing compared to the confession of truth. Tonight, we shall have both." Soon after came Miss Clara Merriweather, pale and tremulous but composed. She looked around the shop with sorrowful eyes. "It feels different," she said softly. "As if the life has gone out of it." Poirot bowed. "Death leaves behind silence, mademoiselle, but it also leaves understanding. I ask only that you listen tonight with courage." Lastly, Mrs. Harcourt arrived. She entered quietly, dressed in deep mourning, her veil drawn low. Her bearing was still proud, but there was a tremor in her movements, a subdued grace as of someone resigned to fate. She greeted no one, merely taking her seat beside the counter. Behind her, Blaine, the burly shop assistant, stood awkwardly by the door. Japp had insisted on his presence, suspecting the man might still hold a secret. Poirot welcomed him with a polite nod. "Thank you, Monsieur Blaine. Your memory, I think, will serve us well." When all were assembled, Poirot closed the door, locking it quietly. The faint click echoed in the stillness. "My friends," he began, his voice calm and deliberate, "we are here tonight to complete the pattern, to place each thread where it belongs, so that the picture may at last be clear. A man is dead, Mr. Alfred Merriweather, dealer of fine things and keeper of one most dangerous possession, the truth." He paused, letting the words settle. "Each of you played some part, great or small, in the events that led to his death. And though the act itself was committed by one hand, its cause lies deeper, in secrets, in love, in shame, and in the strange mercy that hides within fear." Hastings, who had been standing by the fireplace, watched the listeners closely. Clara's face was drawn with confusion, Mrs. Harcourt sat motionless, head bowed, Blaine shifted uncomfortably, and Japp, impatient but respectful, folded his arms. Poirot began to pace slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "You all know of the missing locket, item 47 in Mr. Merriweather's ledger. You also know that it contained a marriage certificate. That much, I have revealed. But perhaps you do not all know whose marriage certificate it was." He turned toward Clara. "Mademoiselle, I am sorry for the pain this will bring. But the truth is owed to you most of all. The locket contained proof that your late mother, Marian Merriweather, was married, years before your birth, to Arthur Harcourt." Clara gasped. "To Mrs. Harcourt's husband." "Just so. He married again without ever dissolving the first union. Thus, when he wed Mrs. Violet Harcourt, he committed bigamy, a crime which, had it been discovered, would have destroyed his name and hers. Mrs. Harcourt lifted her head slowly. "I did not know," she whispered. "Not until years after his death. I found the certificate among his papers. I burned everything else, but I could not destroy the locket. It was the last trace of him." Poirot nodded gently. "Yes. But fate, you see, is fond of irony. The locket found its way, through some chance or sale, into the possession of Mr. Merriweather. He opened it, read what it contained, and understood what it meant for his niece. He turned to Blaine. "You, monsieur, witnessed part of that discovery, did you not?" Blaine looked startled, then nodded reluctantly. I saw him at the counter the night before he died. He was staring at the thing, pale as paper. Said something about setting things right. I didn't know what he meant." Poirot smiled faintly. "You see, he planned to tell Miss Merriweather the truth, to protect her honor and perhaps to force Mrs. Harcourt to confess. But in doing so, he sealed his fate. He looked directly at Mrs. Harcourt. You went to him on the morning of his death, did you not, madam?" She nodded once, her voice low. "Yes. I begged him to keep silent. He refused." Poirot inclined his head. "And in the struggle that followed, he was killed. The rest we know." Japp stirred impatiently. "You've already had her confession, Poirot. What's left to say?" Poirot raised a hand. "A moment, my friend. There is still one small matter, a detail that does not fit." He drew from his pocket a folded paper, the torn, charred fragments he had pieced together earlier. "This letter," he said, "was found in the waste bin. It spoke of destruction if revealed. But note, it was written in a man's hand, not a woman's." He turned toward Blaine, his tone sharpening. "You wrote this, did you not?" Blaine's face went white. "What? Me? I swear." Poirot's gaze held him fast. "You were blackmailing Mr. Merriweather. You discovered the secret first, perhaps by chance, and sought to profit from it. When Mrs. Harcourt came to the shop that morning, you followed, intending to eavesdrop, perhaps even to seize the locket yourself." Blaine's voice faltered. I only wanted a bit of money." "But you got something else," said Poirot, his voice suddenly grave. "You saw the struggle. You saw her strike the blow. And then, fearing discovery, you helped arrange the scene to make it look like robbery. You took the locket, intending to sell it later, but panic overcame you, and you hid it in the desk where I found it." Blaine's mouth opened, then closed again. At last he sank into a chair, head in his hands. "It's true. God help me, it's true." Clara stared at him in horror. "You let her suffer, let us all suffer." Poirot stepped forward, his expression both stern and kind. "You see, Hastings, there are always two criminals in such cases, the one who kills, and the one who conceals. Yet I think, in both, it was fear that guided the hand." He turned to Japp. "I leave you, mon ami, to handle the matter as the law requires. But I ask only this, that you remember mercy. Mrs. Harcourt's act was born of panic, not malice. And this man's, of greed, but not cruelty." Japp nodded grimly. "The courts will decide that. But I'll say this, Poirot, you've untangled it neatly as ever." Poirot gave a small bow. "Merci, Japp. It is the little grey cells, you understand, they do not rest until the pattern is perfect." When all was over and the shop was empty once more, Poirot stood alone before the counter. The lamplight flickered on the dust motes, turning them to tiny stars. Hastings came to stand beside him. "So that's it," Hastings said quietly. "2 lives ruined, 1 lost. It's a sad sort of justice. Poirot nodded. Yes, mon ami. But even in sadness, there is clarity. The truth, she is like the dawn, sometimes cold, but always bringing light. He looked once more around the little shop, where silence had returned at last. Now, Hastings, come. We have done our work. Let the ghosts of Merriweather sleep. Chapter 7, The Whisper of Doubt. 2 days had passed since the gathering at Merriweather's. Fleet Street had resumed its ordinary rhythm, the press boys shouting, the carriages clattering, and the city's restless pulse beating once more beneath the mist. But for Poirot, quiet had not yet returned. He sat at his breakfast table in his small but immaculate flat, a cup of chocolate steaming gently beside him. Captain Hastings, seated opposite, was reading the Daily Mail, which carried a modest column about the Fleet Street antique tragedy. The piece praised Poirot's brilliance and hinted at forthcoming charges against Mrs. Harcourt and her assistant, Mr. Blaine. Hastings folded the paper and looked across the table. Well, Poirot, that's the case done, I suppose. Japp says Blaine's made a full statement, and Mrs. Harcourt's being kept under medical supervision until the inquest. You've done it again, old chapter? Poirot's eyes, small, green, and oddly luminous, flicked toward him. Ah, Hastings, you are too quick to close the book. The case, perhaps, is legally done. But morally? Ah, non, that is another matter entirely. Hastings frowned. I don't see what more there is to puzzle out. She killed him in a fit of panic, the fellow tried to cover it up, and you found them both out. Simple. Poirot gave a delicate sigh. Simple, yes, too simple, perhaps. You English, you love your clean endings, your sense of order restored. But murder, mon ami, is never so tidy. There are always aftertastes of doubt. He rose, walking to the window, hands clasped neatly behind his back. There is something that does not please me. Something small, perhaps, yet discordant. It is like one wrong note in a sonata. The eye may not see it, but the mind, she hears. Hastings leaned forward. What doesn't fit? Poirot turned, his expression thoughtful. Mrs. Harcourt's confession. It is too perfect. Too calm. You remember, she said she only wished to silence him, that the knife was seized in panic. Yet she described the struggle with remarkable precision. And her gloves, Hastings, her gloves were spotless when she came to me. Not a stain, not a tear. Hastings blinked. But that was 2 days later. But leather does not forget, my friend. If one has gripped a blade with force, the metal leaves its mark, a slight indentation, a warp of the stitching. Hers were pristine. Hastings frowned. You think she lied? I think, said Poirot slowly, that she protected someone. The confession was given, yes, but out of love, or guilt, not truth. I ask myself, who, then, does she shield? He walked to his writing desk, where the silver locket lay wrapped in paper. He unfolded it gently, staring at the portrait within. The dead man knew of the secret marriage. The lady feared exposure. But there was another person who might have felt the same fear, one who believed her whole life, her very identity, rested on respectability. Clara Merriweather, Hastings breathed. Poirot nodded gravely. Just so. That afternoon, Poirot paid a quiet visit to Miss Merriweather's small lodgings near Bloomsbury. She received him nervously, her face pale, her hands clasped together in her lap. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly, I thought the case was finished. Nearly, mademoiselle, he said gently, taking a seat opposite her. But I have learned, in my profession, that truth does not rest until all her shadows are banished. May I ask, when last you saw your uncle alive, what passed between you? She hesitated, her eyes flickering. Only ordinary things. I went to fetch some papers for him before the sale. He seemed distracted, almost anxious. I thought he was unwell. Poirot's eyes watched her closely, but kindly. And did you see Mrs. Harcourt that morning? Clara shook her head quickly. No, of course not. Strange, murmured Poirot. For Mrs. Harcourt remembers otherwise. She said she arrived to find you leaving the shop. Clara's breath caught. That's not true. None. Poirot tilted his head. Perhaps not. But there is one small matter that troubles me, mademoiselle. The scent of jasmine. It lingered on the air long after Mrs. Harcourt had gone, yet the brand she uses, I have since learned, is of a very light variety. It fades quickly. But yours, he paused, his gaze softening. You, too, wear jasmine, do you not? A silence followed. Clara's fingers twisted in her lap. It was my mother's perfume, she whispered. I wear it always. Poirot nodded. I thought so. Then it was your scent I noticed, mademoiselle, not hers. And that means you were indeed in the shop that morning, after all. Her lips parted, then closed again. She looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. Yes. I went there earlier than I said. I wanted to speak with my uncle about something personal. About Mrs. Harcourt. She nodded slowly. I had found one of her letters. She was begging him to keep a secret. I didn't understand what it meant. When I asked, he became angry, told me not to interfere. He said it was a matter of honor. Poirot's tone was very quiet. And then? He said terrible things about my mother, things I couldn't bear to hear. He said she had been deceived, that she had lived her life under a lie. Tears welled in her eyes. I lost control. I didn't mean to hurt him, I swear it. I just pushed him, he fell, there was so much blood. Poirot rose, laying a gentle hand on her shoulder. Hush, mademoiselle. I understand. You did not mean to kill him. She buried her face in her hands. Mrs. Harcourt found me there. She saw what had happened. She said she would take the blame, that no one would believe me innocent anyway. I let her. I was terrified. Poirot's eyes were soft but unsparing. Ah, the instinct of the mother, even one who is not truly so. She has lived her life shielding others from shame. She would rather die branded a murderess than see you fall. Clara looked up at him in anguish. What will happen now? Poirot sighed gently. I do not know. I shall speak to Jap, of course. The law is not always kind, but it can be merciful. Your uncle's death was tragic, yet it was also an accident of the heart. I will see that the truth is told with compassion. That evening, back at his flat, Hastings found Poirot once again at his desk, writing carefully with his neat, angular hand. You've spoken to Jap, I suppose, he asked. Poirot nodded. Oh, he will reconsider the charges. Mrs. Harcourt shall not stand alone. She will be seen for what she is, a woman who took upon herself the guilt of another, as an act of love. Hastings looked thoughtful. You know, Poirot, sometimes I think your sense of justice is rather more merciful than the law's. Poirot smiled faintly. Perhaps, mon ami. But remember, the law protects the body of society. I protect the soul. He folded his letter and sealed it with wax. This I send to Mrs. Harcourt. It contains the truth, and my gratitude. Without her courage, we might never have known the full story. Hastings glanced at the locket resting nearby. And what of that? Poirot looked at it for a long moment. It shall be returned to Miss Merriweather. It is both burden and inheritance, a reminder that love, when built on deceit, leaves tragedy in its wake. He rose and straightened his cuffs. But now, Hastings, I shall sleep. The little grey cells, they are weary, but content. The harmony, at last, is restored. Outside, the fog drifted past the window, pale and slow, as if London itself were exhaling a long-held breath. And in that hush, Poirot's mind, so often restless, so rarely at peace, grew still. Yet even then, deep within his immaculate order, one question flickered faintly, like a candle left burning through the night. Does truth, when spoken, heal, or does it only wound anew? Chapter 8. The Curtain Falls. The inquest into Alfred Merriweather's death was held a week later in a small chamber adjoining the magistrate's court at Holborn. The fog had lifted at last, leaving a thin, clean sunlight that fell through the tall windows like pale gold upon the gathered company. Hercule Poirot sat near the front, immaculate as ever, a small white flower in his buttonhole. Beside him was Captain Hastings, soberly dressed and visibly uneasy. He had never liked courtrooms, they seemed to him places where misfortune was made official. Mrs. Violet Harcourt sat in the witness area, veiled and composed. Her hands rested still upon her lap. Miss Clara Merriweather, pale but resolute, sat a little behind her. Inspector Japp, representing the police, watched the proceedings with his usual brisk alertness, though even he seemed somewhat subdued. When the coroner entered and the proceedings began, the usual formalities passed swiftly. The medical report confirmed the manner of death, a single stab wound, fatal within moments. The knife had been identified as belonging to the shop. Then came the question of responsibility, and it was here that Poirot rose, bowing slightly to the coroner. "If it pleases you, monsieur," he said, in his precise, courteous English, "I would request permission to address the court, not as an advocate of law, but as a humble seeker of truth. There has been confession, yes, but not understanding. And without understanding, justice, she is blind." The coroner, who had heard of Poirot's renown, inclined his head. "You may proceed, Mr. Poirot." Poirot turned to face the small assembly. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice quiet but carrying, "we have spoken much of guilt, and of crime, and of fear. But I ask you to look not with the eyes of punishment, but with the eyes of pity. For here we have not murder born of greed or hatred, but a chain of sorrow, each link forged by love misunderstood." He clasped his hands behind his back, pacing slowly as he spoke. Alfred Merriweather was a man of principle, a man who believed truth, however cruel, must always be spoken. He discovered, by chance, a secret long buried, that Mrs. Harcourt's late husband had deceived two women, marrying one while still bound to another. The first wife was Marian Merriweather, the mother of Clara. A murmur rippled through the small audience, though most already knew the outline. Poirot raised a hand for silence. He wished to reveal the truth, perhaps to cleanse the stain that touched his family's name. But in so doing, he forgot one thing, that truth, when delivered without mercy, may wound deeper than deceit. He turned toward Mrs. Harcourt, whose face was pale but calm. "You, madam, went to plead with him. You wished to protect the living, Miss Merriweather, above all, from shame. And though your heart was heavy, you took upon yourself the burden of guilt when tragedy struck." Her head bowed slightly, but she did not speak. Poirot continued, his gaze softening. "But what you did not foresee was that the one you sought to shield, the child of Marian Merriweather, had already learned something of your quarrel. Miss Clara came to the shop that morning, before you. She confronted her uncle. Harsh words passed, words that shattered the delicate mirror of her world. Clara's hands trembled. Poirot's tone was gentle. In her distress, she struck him, not with intention, but in blind emotion. He fell, and it was done. A life ended, an accident of the heart. She was terrified. And you, madam, arriving soon after, found her there. You saw what had happened and understood in an instant. You, who had lost a husband to deceit, would now lose your honor to silence, yet you chose silence still. You confessed to save her. The coroner's pen paused. Every sound in the room seemed to hush. Poirot turned back to the assembly. Thus, the case of the murder at Merriweather's is no simple tale of crime. It is a tragedy in 3 acts of truth, love, and sacrifice. The truth that killed, the love that blinded, the sacrifice that redeemed. He looked to Japp. Inspector Japp will confirm that Miss Merriweather's statement, given privately, corroborates the physical evidence, the angle of the blow, the position of the body, and the timing. She will not stand trial for deliberate murder, but for misadventure, an accident in passion, not malice. Japp nodded gravely. That's right. The Crown satisfied there was no intent. Poirot inclined his head. And Mrs. Harcourt, she will not be charged. Her actions, though misleading, were those of a soul who gave herself for another. Let the world not call her liar, but mother. Mrs. Harcourt lifted her veil slightly, tears glistening in her eyes. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly, I thank you. You have given me something I thought lost forever, dignity. Poirot bowed, his expression full of quiet respect. Madam, it is you who have given the world an example, that even amid disgrace, love may still be noble. The coroner cleared his throat. The court concurs with the evidence as presented. I shall record the verdict as death by misadventure. A murmur of relief passed through the room. Clara wept silently, her face buried in her hands. Poirot, discreetly as ever, retrieved his handkerchief and placed it beside her. As the chamber slowly emptied, Japp came over, shaking his head. You've done it again, Poirot. I don't know how you managed to find decency even in the middle of murder. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, my good Japp, it is because I look not only for the guilty, but for the why. The motive is the heart of every crime, and the heart, she is rarely wicked, only wounded. Hastings clapped his friend's shoulder as they stepped outside into the pale sunlight. Well, old chap, I must say, that was magnificent. You've turned tragedy into something almost, well, poetic. Poirot chuckled softly. Murder, Hastings, is never poetry. But perhaps, at times, it can teach us rhythm, the rhythm of human weakness, and of forgiveness. They walked together toward the waiting cab. London, freed from fog, glistened faintly after rain. Newspaper boys shouted headlines, carriages rolled, life, as always, moved on. That evening, Poirot sat once more in his armchair, sipping his favorite tisane. The case file lay closed upon his desk. Hastings, seated opposite, watched the firelight flicker across the detective's face. Do you think Miss Merriweather will recover? He asked quietly. Poirot nodded. Yes. Time will heal her, perhaps not the memory, but the soul. She will know that her mother's name is cleared, that the past, though painful, need no longer be hidden. She is young, and the young, Hastings, they grow toward light. And Mrs. Harcourt. Poirot sighed gently. Ah, that one, she will live quietly, I think. The proud woman has been humbled, but not destroyed. Perhaps she will find peace at last, knowing she has done one good thing in a life shadowed by deception. He leaned back, eyes half closed. And as for poor Mr. Merriweather, he sought to defend truth without compassion. He forgot that truth, like fire, must be tended, not hurled. It is a pity, yes, but in death, he has taught us something. Hastings tilted his head. What's that, Poirot? That truth and mercy, said Poirot softly, are not enemies, they are partners. Without one, the other destroys. He smiled, his gaze turning toward the faint reflection of the fire in the window. And so, mon ami, the curtain falls. The shop on Fleet Street will reopen, new hands will dust its treasures, and life will go on. But somewhere, amid the polished glass and silver, a shadow will remain, a reminder that even the finest antiques bear the marks of time. Hastings smiled faintly. "You're becoming a philosopher, Poirot." "Mais non," said Poirot, closing his eyes. "Merely an observer, of crime, yes, but also of hearts. And in this case, I think the hearts, they have been cleansed." The fire crackled softly. The little clock upon the mantelpiece chimed the hour, delicate and precise. Poirot rose, adjusting his cuffs with his usual care. "Come, Hastings," he said lightly. "It is late. And tomorrow, who knows? Perhaps there will be another mystery to trouble the little grey cells." As they left the room, the faint echo of their steps mingled with the ticking of the clock, steady, elegant, and utterly precise. The great detective smiled once more to himself and murmured, as though to the unseen city beyond the window, "La vérité, elle guérit toujours, si elle en a le courage de la voir." The truth always heals, if one has the courage to see it.